What if you found out a pastor you've been following for years is a fraud? That's something a lot of people now have to come face to face with, as Pastor Lamar Whitehead, also known as the Bling Bishop, has been found guilty of fraud. Following his guilty verdict, people have been digging into this pastor's past and exposing him for who he truly is. Now it seems like he's been a fraud since a young age and has been involved with everything from wire fraud to identity theft. For a man of God, Bishop Whitehead seemed to have put on a false face in public, which would explain the fancy cars, designer clothes, and other luxuries he's been showing off to his fans.
Morning. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning.
Lamar Whitehead became an icon for many people who followed the Christian religion. After serving 5 years in prison, he came out a different person when he was released from a correctional facility. However, this was all on the surface, as now it seems like his criminal operations and procedures never stopped. From outright lying to FBI agents, to abusing the trust that one of his churchgoers had in him, this bishop has been busy over the last couple of years. While his followers thought that his wealth came from his trust in the Lord, it seems like it was all just one big lie. Now, following a guilty verdict in court, Whitehead was found to be involved with more than just these things.
Rashid testified during the trial. You and your mother trusted this guy.
Yeah, we trusted him a lot.
Join me in this video as I explore the dark side of a bishop who had won over the trust of over 1 million followers. We'll take a look at what Whitehead has done, the cases that have piled up against him, and even talk about the way he treated some of his churchgoers. Born in 1978, Lamar Whitehead grew up in Brooklyn, New York. According to Whitehead, his father was Arthur Miller Jr., who died when Whitehead was just a couple of months old.
The thing I want to say about that, if they had cameras when my father was beat and strangled to death by 16 police officers, then we would have had a witness. But back in 1978, the black man and the black woman's testimony or witness statement didn't mean anything.
The story of Arthur Miller Jr. came to light again recently. It's known that he was murdered in 1978, and recently more details have been shared. This included more details of his death, including the fact that he was choked to death by police in New York. There has been some controversy regarding whether or not Arthur Miller Jr. was really Whitehead's father. During Whitehead's upbringing, his mother raised him. He excelled at school and was even offered several scholarship options to choose from by the time he was old enough to go to university. He was able to get an athletic scholarship at Farmingdale University as well as Shaw University for his exceptional performance on the field. However, while he initially pursued his athletic side, Whitehead decided to make a major change when he went to Eastern New Mexico University. Here he studied both videography and accounting. After his graduation, Whitehead became a mortgage broker. This is where his career started. However, Whitehead soon found himself in trouble, with the first of many troubles caused by him starting in 2004, or perhaps even earlier. The New York police received complaints from multiple people in 2004 related to their identities being stolen. A total of 9 victims were involved in this case, where their identities were used to buy Range Rovers. Police were able to successfully arrest one suspect who shared the exact same address as Whitehead. When the New York City Police created the Theft Investigation Unit in the same year, they started to go after Whitehead, as he also became a suspect behind these identity theft cases.
Whitehead used the stolen identities to open lines of credit in his victims' names.
The plot thickened when police finally arrested Whitehead 1 year later in 2005. At the time of his arrest, Whitehead was driving a Range Rover. The Suffolk County Police Department made the arrest as Whitehead moved to Teaneck, New Jersey after the New York City Police's Theft Investigation Unit started to pursue him. After some investigation by this unit, following Whitehead's arrest, they made a couple of discoveries. This included the fact that he was running a criminal operation that focused on identity theft and fraud. During the time Whitehead was running this operation, he was able to use the identities of 50 different individuals to buy a variety of cars, including Range Rovers. The total amount of money that Whitehead was able to steal using false identities counted up to over $2 million. Details of his arrest and the identity theft operation that Whitehead ran were published in a newspaper article in 2006. However, it wasn't until 2 years later that he went to court and received his sentence. The victims were spread throughout multiple states in the U.S. Some of the states included New York, Georgia, and Tennessee. After being charged with his crimes, Whitehead spent a total of 5 years in prison. He was sent to the Sing Sing Correctional Facility, where he was released after serving his sentence in 2013. This wasn't the only fraudulent activity from Whitehead before his arrest in 2008. In 2005, Whitehead took out a personal loan for $200,000. This loan was taken out from Maximo Brigado Darman and Julio Brigado Young. Whitehead told the two that he would be able to pay back the entire $200,000 within just 1 month, along with an extra $25,000 as interest. However, Maximo and Julio didn't receive any repayments from Whitehead and decided to take the matter to court. When he was sued, the court ruled in favor of the complaints and issued Whitehead to pay a total of $306,000. This was the same year Whitehead was charged and sentenced to jail time. Whitehead's story really starts once he stepped out of the Sing Sing Correctional Facility. According to him, he was a changed man when he got out of prison, served his time, and quickly began to delve into the world of Christianity.
So Whitehead did some time and came out and felt like, oh, I got to clean my name. I'm a bishop now. And what he did was align himself with Eric Adams, who is now the mayor of New York City.
By 2014, just a year after being released, Whitehead founded his own organization called the Leaders of Tomorrow International Churches. He became a bishop and a preacher and quickly took to social media to promote himself. Many believe that Whitehead's close friendship with Eric Adams is what helped him get a head start with his career as a bishop, which was also what he used to defraud a lot of people after founding his Christian organization. By August 2013, Whitehead had already become a pastor. Eric Adams introduced him as a good friend and a good brother, paving the way for Whitehead to become an influencer in religion. This was the way Eric addressed Whitehead when he introduced him at a concert. At this point, Whitehead started to get followers as a preacher. By 2016, he decided to start a new youth program. Yet publications quickly picked up on the fact that this ex-convict was now creating religious programs that focused on the young. The focus wasn't on what Whitehead wanted to do, but rather on how he was doing things. You see, many believe that Whitehead tapped into his friendship with Eric Adams as a way to get things done. His ties to Eric, who was the Brooklyn Borough president at the time, helped him secure funds for his ventures. This friendship made sure Whitehead was able to create for-profit organizations and raise the funds he needed to go from plan to reality. Throughout the years, especially after creating his Christian organization, Whitehead often found himself in trouble. The thing is, he was the cause behind these troubles. For example, in November 2014, Whitehead was found to be promoting a collaboration between him and the DA's office. This collaboration was false, and the Brooklyn District Attorney's Office sent a cease and desist letter to Whitehead. In 2015, police arrested Whitehead. According to police statements, the arrest was made for child abuse after Whitehead was hitting his son, who was just 7 years old at the time. The case was dropped, but just a few months after this event, police arrested Whitehead once again. This time, his crime was violating the order of protection. The case was sealed, and not many details were shared regarding what exactly it was about. Whitehead continued his pursuit of the Christian community and was officially named a bishop by the year 2016. By this time, he was already seen flaunting his wealth. What made so many people start to follow the preacher was the fact that he tied the name of God to wealth. He made millions of people believe that his riches and wealth came from his belief in God. Those who started to follow Whitehead thought that their prayers for wealth would be answered if they obeyed the preachings of this bishop. Little did they know it was all just a show for Whitehead, and that the truth had a much darker side compared to what they saw on the surface. All of those riches that got Whitehead the nickname of the Bling Bishop didn't come from his faith in God and his preachings. Instead, it all came from his criminal activities that continued after he was released from the Sing Sing Correctional Facility. Even though he came out and appeared to be a different man, he clearly didn't learn his lesson, as his fraud continued to run in the background. To understand all that went down, there are several things that we have to cover. this is going to show you who Whitehead is when he steps out of his church and goes back to living his private life. And who he is definitely doesn't fit what all of his fans thought before the news started to hit publications about his recent convictions. First, let's talk about the fact that Whitehead seemed to have taken donations for himself. The Leaders of Tomorrow Brooklyn organization, which was founded by Whitehead, had a donate button on its website for quite a long time. However, when asked about donations, Whitehead told sources that they never solicited funds. The donate button was soon removed from the organization's website. This was very suspicious, but it doesn't seem like much came from the matter. What it does mean is that Whitehead likely received donations through that button on the organization's website. However, this money just went into his pocket. It's speculation, but there's a strong possibility that it's what happened, especially if you take a closer look at everything the Bling Bishop has done over the years. One thing that I want you to note here is the fact that while all of this happened, Whitehead was flaunting his riches. Whenever he came into the public eye, we would see him wearing really expensive designer brand clothes. He was also driving through New York with his gray Rolls Royce, which is known to be an especially expensive car that's usually reserved for the wealthy.
Why do you have that much money and jewelry on you? I'm second guessing them folks that was laughing at him for his church that ain't look that spiffy, you know? Because if you had that money to spend on jewelry, dog, you can make sure your church on point. If you had that amount of money in jewelry, you could go ahead and get it.
While he was driving around in this car, he still owed a hefty sum of money on a personal loan he took out the same year he was sentenced to serve 5 years in prison. As of the latest details, it seems like this pastor still owes Maximo Brigado Darman and Julio Brigado Young a total of $261,000 following the lawsuit that was settled in court. There aren't many details about his plans to repay the personal loan. We also couldn't find information regarding the payments he had already made. However, we did discover that this was not the only time when Whitehead conducted fraud for his own gain. In 2021, one of his latest fraudulent activities came to light. This was made public when a former congregant in New York decided to sue Whitehead. According to the complaint, Whitehead defrauded her of money. The plaintiff noted that she was defrauded for an amount of $90,000.
There's a woman who was a parishioner there who has sued him for $90,000, claiming that he took her total retirement, claiming he was going to invest in her, and he didn't invest in nothing.
The plaintiff later made her name public. She is known as Pauline Anderson. According to the case she filed, Whitehead promised to improve Anderson's credit score. At the same time, he also promised to help her purchase a house and then renovate it. He asked her to make a $90,000 investment in his ventures, but later told her that the money was not for an investment. Instead, he turned things around and said that the money she gave him was considered a campaign contribution. Thus, this meant he had no intention of making repayments on the money he received from Anderson. In fact, in a text message that was exposed later on, the bishop told Anderson that he had already invested the $90,000 that she provided to his foundation. He continued to say that that's what he does. He invests money and then calls out the $90,000 as a donation. He mentioned anything goes into the organization as a donation if it's not tied to a contract. Now, one thing that you need to understand here is the fact that Anderson was convinced to liquidate all of her savings. Whitehead knew that Anderson was going through a tough time buying a house, particularly due to her poor credit record. This happened in 2020. As Anderson was a member of Whitehead's church, she trusted his words and decided to go ahead with the liquidation of her savings. So at this point, Whitehead convinced one of his church members to invest their life savings into his campaigns. The campaigns that he was running at the time were in opposition to the current president of the Brooklyn borough. That means he took that $90,000 that Anderson had been saving up, probably for several decades, and decided to use it as a way of gaining a competitive edge with his marketing. Apart from promising to help Anderson buy a house, Whitehead also promised to pay her a monthly allowance fee from the investment of $100. The $100 was supposed to go to Anderson's monthly expenses, which is a ridiculously low amount compared to the current cost of living. However, Anderson only received her $100 monthly payments for a short time, and when it stopped, she started to become concerned. Remember, This was her life savings, so it wasn't something she could lose. She agreed to this entire arrangement because she trusted Bishop Whitehead. Yet now it started to backfire on her. On the 19th of May, 2021, Anderson decided to add more evidence to her case against Whitehead. She shared text messages that were exchanged between her and Whitehead at the time. These text messages told Anderson that she had made a donation and basically implied that Whitehead had no obligation to pay her back. These text messages got a bit out of hand. Bishop Whitehead decided to declare that the devil was using Anderson's son and continued to tell her that the hand of judgment would be coming for her. Whitehead essentially sent threats to Anderson using a very sensitive topic, as you need to understand that Anderson was a follower of God and part of Whitehead's church up until this point. Whitehead also outright called Anderson a liar. Fortunately, Anderson was able to remain calm during all of these text messages, which helped to ensure that she didn't come down to the level that Whitehead had stood to. Later in 2021, a document was leaked proposing a property purchased by Whitehead under his business name, Whitehead Estates. The property in question was a mansion, and the selling price was $4.4 million. New evidence started to be added to the lawsuit against Whitehead. This document was added to the lawsuit, claiming that the $90,000 investment from Anderson was actually used as a deposit for the purchase of that mansion. However, according to public records, the sale never went through, so it's likely Whitehead didn't complete the purchase of the mansion. While it doesn't seem like Whitehead completed the purchase of the mansion, there was another property that he purchased for $4.15 million. There are public records that show Whitehead borrowed this amount from a mortgage company situated in Brooklyn. However, within just 2 or 3 months, he was able to boost the mortgage rate for $4.5 million. This might have been due to renovations done to the property. A few years before these purchases, Whitehead also bought a house in New Jersey. He paid $1.6 million for this property. One news publication known as The City wanted to reach out to Whitehead regarding the lawsuits filed against him and potentially get his side of the story. However, when reporters arrived at the property Whitehead purchased in 2019, all they found was a notice stuck on the front door of the house. The notice was dated 25 July 2022, stating that no payments for the mortgage were obtained since the start of June 2022. The notice was made out to Whitehead Estates, LLC, with a line that read, "Attention, Lamore Whitehead." Whether Whitehead simply didn't have the funds to continue making payments on his mortgage or was just refusing to pay from his side was not clear. There haven't been any major updates on this situation either. However, now that we've covered a lot of the cases in which Bishop Whitehead was involved, it's time that we look at the latest news regarding this deceiving preacher.
During a highly publicized robbery at his Brooklyn church, now the so-called Bling bishop is also poised to lose his freedom.
Early in March 2024, the court officially ruled that Lamore Whitehead was guilty. The surprising thing about this conviction was the fact that the court ruled Whitehead guilty of 5 different schemes and cases, not just one. The conviction quickly made fans realize that the Bling pastor that they have been following over the last couple of years never truly came out a better person when he was released from the Sing Sing Correctional Facility. Instead, he continued with his fraud and criminal activities, scheming behind the scenes. These are the factors that contributed to his ability to showcase his love for the luxuries in life. So, let's take a closer look at what he was found guilty of. First of all, the jury ruled that Whitehead took advantage of the trust that a parishioner of his church had in him. This was the case of Anderson, who he convinced to invest her retirement savings of $90,000 in his organization and cause. There are several accusations regarding how Whitehead used the $90,000 that he received from Anderson. Some reports believe that he used the $90,000 as an initial deposit to buy a mansion. However, public records don't show whether or not the transaction actually went through. There are also suggestions that the $90,000 went to his campaign while he ran for Brooklyn Borough President.
You're in this defensive mode, so it appears that now you have an attorney. According to your press conference, you said your attorney advised you not to talk about any of this. Well, if you're advised not to talk about anything that has to do with this case, then why call her a liar? Why question whether, trying to get your congregants to say, was she ever a member here? They probably don't know.
We also need to consider the fact that he's the Bling bishop. Whenever we saw Whitehead in public, one thing was sure. We could expect bling, from fancy cars to luxury and very expensive fashion. With this in mind, it's not a surprise that many people believe a lot of the $90,000 investment from Anderson went into Whitehead's wardrobe, helping him continue his appearance of being wealthy and wearing the bling people have come to know him for. Regardless of how he decided to spend the money, Whitehead turned around and told Anderson that it was a donation and that he had no obligation to pay the funds back. The court ruled that he abused Anderson's trust when they announced him guilty of the cases that were laid before him. This isn't the only case that was brought up during the court case. The jury also found Whitehead guilty of trying to obtain a loan fraudulently. According to this case, Whitehead faked a series of bank documents to try and secure him a large sum of money in the form of a loan. Even though the loan didn't go through, it's important to understand the seriousness of the matter. Faking bank documents to secure a loan can cause major problems for the lender in the long run, especially if you consider the fact that Whitehead's loans usually go into the millions. Apart from these allegations, the jury also declared Whitehead guilty of, as they put it, bullying someone to give him $5,000. Once he was able to get this $5,000 from the victim, he continued with fraudulent activities. Whitehead tried to get more than $5,000 from the businessman. Fortunately, the businessman was able to avoid losing more than this amount to Whitehead, but the jury still ruled that he was trying to defraud the victim. The court case also mentioned that Whitehead lied to federal agents in the United States. When it comes to talking to federal agents, lying is something that can land you in big trouble. That's exactly what happened here, as it's considered a criminal offense. Whitehead might have thought that he wouldn't get caught for lying, but the shadows from his past have finally caught up to him. According to official statements, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, also known as the FBI, received a warrant to search the property of Whitehead's mansion. This is the mansion he owns in New Jersey. The FBI agent specifically asked Whitehead how many mobile phones he was using. He confirmed that he was only using a single phone, which he held on him. However, when the agent started to search his home, they found a second phone that belonged to Whitehead. The agents confirmed that Whitehead was frequently using the second phone that they found inside the property. This is considered lying to federal agents. When considering the fact that he tried to hide the second phone, it could have been due to illegal activities that he conducted without having to use his primary cell phone. An official statement was later released by the United States Attorney's Office. The statement was made by Damian Williams, who is a United States Attorney for the Southern New York District. Williams reported that Whitehead was found guilty of 5 federal crimes. He also added that Whitehead now faces a sentence that will likely see him go to prison. Whitehead had been arrested before, as we've already covered. He served 5 years in prison and was released in 2013. This sentence was made after he was found guilty of identity theft. While he was arrested on several occasions following his release from the Sing Sing Correctional Facility in 2013, he was released each time and charges were dropped. However, this time he stood before a judge and was ruled guilty by a unanimous jury for all 5 cases that were brought up during the trial. This time, it's very unlikely that these cases will simply be dropped. The official statement also mentioned the potential jail time that Whitehead may now face according to the verdicts that were made against him. First, the wire fraud cases can give him up to 20 years of imprisonment each as a maximum. If he were to be sentenced to the maximum time in prison for all 4 of these fraud cases, then that means he would face 80 years in prison. The fact that he made false statements to FBI agents can also land him an additional maximum of 5 years. This brings the maximum time that the judge can now serve him to 85 years. It's unlikely that he would get this much time to serve in prison, but Williams did mention it's a statutory maximum that has been prescribed and does not offer an accurate view of what Whitehead can expect when his sentence is served. When looking at Bishop Whitehead, it's not just about the fraud that he's committed. There are more things that we should discuss. This includes a case where he became violent with a woman during a church service.
This past Sunday, where he was giving a sermon, and he says a woman who was being disruptive then walked up to him, and he said he felt threatened by this woman, he and his wife and his child. So part of this was captured on surveillance video. Let's take a look.
In the video, we can see the woman walking up to Whitehead as he was delivering the Sunday church service. According to statements provided by Whitehead, he felt threatened by the woman. We can see in the video that he quickly grabbed hold of her and pushed her out of the building. However, by taking a closer look at the video, we cannot see the woman doing anything from her side that would provoke this kind of manhandling from a preacher at church. Yet Whitehead decided to file an official charge against the woman for being disruptive in his church. Later, news publications asked him about the situation, and Whitehead explained that the woman was going for him, his wife, and his children. He continued to explain that he decided to grab her.
That's when you see her walk in front of me, going at my wife and my daughter, and I grabbed her. Everybody's saying that I choked her. How can you choke somebody from behind?
Once again, if you take a closer look at the video, things don't really match up. The woman that he grabbed and shoved out of the church made a statement shortly after the event. Her name was Tarsha Howard, and she mentioned during her statement that she was not going after his wife, even though that's what he was consistently saying.
That I did not charge after his wife. It's on video, and everyone can see that I was the one that was assaulted. And after this statement, he will hear from my attorney.
As Howard mentions, it was all caught on camera, and the footage clearly shows Whitehead assaulting Howard. Even though Whitehead was also taken into custody, he was released shortly after. Howard did show news reporters the injury she sustained when Whitehead decided to grab her by her neck.
She showed us her injury and made a brief statement.
Something that I do want to note here is that Whitehead and his wife were robbed a while before this event.
It now says churchgoers are traumatized.
Right, everybody get out. I didn't know if they wanted to shoot the church up or if they were just coming for a robbery.
The footage that was released shows a person wearing all black, including a mask over their face, holding a gun toward Whitehead. The bishop later commented on the situation, stating that the followers in the church during the service were traumatized. He also reported that during the robbery, jewelry was stolen from him and his wife. According to Whitehead, the jewelry that the robber stole was valued at more than $1 million. Early in 2024, news surfaced about U.S. Marshals attempting to make an arrest on the person who was alleged to be involved in the robbery. During the attempted arrest, the suspect was shot and killed by the U.S. Marshals. According to official reports, the suspect shot at the Marshals first, and they had to respond in an appropriate manner.
Them to shoot back like it was one of 3 men accused of robbing Bishop Whitehead at Leaders of Tomorrow International Ministry.
Whitehead did speak about the fact that one of the suspects for his robbery during a live service was shot dead. He offered his condolences to the family members of the suspect, pointing out the fact that he was a pastor and had to remain a leader, even though he was still going through the traumatic events from the event itself. From preacher to criminal, the story of Lamore Whitehead is something that we need to take a lesson from. This man was showing off his bling as part of his preachings. He made his followers believe that having faith in him and God would give them the same wealth that he was showcasing while walking around in public. However, it turns out that all that wealth didn't come from his faith in God. Whitehead, who referred to himself as a man of God and was even declared bishop, had other ways of generating wealth in the background. The problem is that these strategies of his were criminal acts. It started with identity theft, and then things quickly began to escalate after Whitehead served 5 years in a corrections facility. Things have started to catch up to this prosperity preacher, as he was officially charged and found guilty in 2024. Now his followers are in the know and understand that his bling didn't come from the faith he so often preached about, but rather from his ability to deceive people and run criminal operations in the background. Whitehead is quickly starting to lose the faith of his followers as people are noticing him for who he truly is. The lesson here is to be wary of who we trust, especially when it comes to vulnerable topics like religion. In Lamore Whitehead's case, he was using his status as a cover-up for his criminal operations. He was outright lying to his followers, acting like he was a bishop with blessings from God, when in reality, he was committing wire fraud and, at one point, even stole the identities of several victims. I'd love to get your thoughts about the cases that are piling up against Whitehead. Are you a follower of his social accounts? Have you been following some of his preachers? What was your reaction when you found out about the latest guilty verdict against Whitehead? As always, leave a comment with your opinions, and don't forget to give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed the content.